Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. If you like what we do here on Spiritual Talk, please support us by pressing the old subscription button. Hopefully, I'll get the finger position right. Anyway, guys, on with today's show. Our guest today is the lovely Mary Marshal. Mary is an intuitive medium. She also teaches paranormal studies at several colleges. She is a paranormal investigator and researcher who lectures regularly on how the sciences relate to the paranormal activity. Her study of quantum physics, multiple dimensions, and her love for the notion of time travel compelled her to write a book. Mary has been an observer her whole life and finds the mind and consciousness intriguing. A quote from Mary's website is the process of who we as humans and what we create is our reality. We conduct ourselves according to the code of ethics, morals, values, and beliefs that happens to be culturally available to us at the given time. The process of how we got to be who we are enthralls me. Mary's book is called Continuum, and you can get that on any good website. I'm sure. I don't know if I should say Amazon. I might get into trouble, but there's plenty of other bookshops it's available from. If you would like to connect with Mary as well, her website is Mary Marshal and the Paranormal MD. Welcome, Mary. Have I got that right? Have I got your address for your website right?
It could be either the Paranormal MD or at .com or Medium Mary Marshal, either depending upon what you're looking at. Same site, just different addresses.
No, I'm really excited.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being on. We're really excited to interview you today because you're kind of like me. I kind of connect with you and a lot of your experiences, especially around the science and phenomenon and trying to understand what is going on around us. Before we come to how you start, because we also like to know a little bit about our guests and how they started down this road. But can you talk about what is your motivation to go down that road into the paranormal world, especially being as a medium?
You know, I actually started publicly as a paranormal investigator, and then that kind of segued into more serious research. And that was the little secret I had, was that I knew I had psychic medium abilities, and I wanted to test it out because I came from a family, I will give you a little bit on that family that does not, most of them do not approve of the psychic medium thing for religious purposes and so on and so forth. So it was a huge shift for me to come out and to be doing that. But at the time, so I thought, well, what would happen if I went into a known haunted location? This is long before all of the, what I like to call here in the States, are the pay and play haunted locations where people pay to go have overnight investigations. You maybe at that time had a handful that did that, so we would go into other locations and we're doing a lot of home. And so that kind of drew me in. Very, very quickly, I noticed, because I do have this very analytical, logical side to my brain as well, that the process that was being used, there really wasn't one for investigating. How do you determine what is evidence, what is not? What is real? What is science? Science, those types of things. And so that sent me down the path of research and really delving into various sciences like physics and and so forth, to look at how does this I'll get this out. What kind of correlation is there? And that's what then started it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. But you've also studied quantum physics. Now, I've left the room on this point because
Yep.
I don't know much about quantum physics. Can you talk a little bit how that relates to what you do?
There's various things that originally attracted me to the topic. One is that people were having experiences, and we're just for the given of ghosts exist. My question, it still is the hugest question, is not do ghosts exist? How do they do what they do? How is it possible that we can have recordings of phantom voices? That made me study what is sound. How do how do recorders and ears and work and so on? And the same thing with the quantum physics, because you started looking at what type of subatomic particles, what type of masses, for a ghost that goes through a wall. That's just contrary to
Yeah.
everything we know. So you start looking at what type of particles or speculation of particles that are out there, quasi particles, even somewhat at this point, would be possible to do that. Looking at the idea of, when you have quantum entanglement and going all the way back to the Big Bang. You have, the Big Bang, everything separates. This really shows us, when you look at quantum entanglement, how connected everything still is, in a sense of energy, in the sense of particle. And the idea the idea of quantum physics, and particularly quantum entanglement, is you have two particles that no matter how far they're separated, if one spins one direction, the other one, no matter what the distance is, will respond the same accordingly. So you start to look at the idea of energy beyond maybe sometimes people look at it mystical, like it's something that's kind of, woo woo. There's just, an aura, there's energy. Well, you know what? An aura is a real thing. It's called the bioelectric field, and every human being has one. So those were started to make that connection to science and to quantum physics in particular.
Yeah. Yeah. That is amazing, because a lot of people, I know you quoted that it's woo woo, but if we can explain this stuff, it gives it credibility. So there must have been something within you that had that urge. Do you think it was your background, growing up in a very religious background, that you felt you needed to explain this to your loved ones in a way? Do you think that was a part of your motivation?
You know what? I'm going to say no. And thank you for that question. You do a lot of interviews. I've never had a question like that. So
Yeah. Okay.
thank you. No, I don't think that it was. It was this inner drive in me, that of just wanting to understand, to know more, to go further, and to really be of use in the field as well. We've got so many people running around, and we've got photos and we've got videos and I wanted to take it further. What was really interesting to me is when I started these conversations, I'll say, and started, bringing these things into lectures and bringing it to the public. Often people who are doing this sort of thing, it was astounding to me how many people were just starting to have privately these conversations about time, about quantum physics, about wormholes, those types of things. And it just, people were drawn to it. And that just was a good confirmation for me to continue to try to find answers. A lot of times I find in the field, because I do, teach a lot of these classes, that if people feel like, if you're saying, well, we don't know, And I'll say, if anybody tells you they know 100% for sure, they're misinforming you. And people feel like that's a slight, an insult. No, here's the thing. If you've got, 100 different paranormal claims, and let's say percentage wise, it's even just 3% of them are actually accurate, true, spot on. That's 3% that we don't have an explanation for. That's what you want to go after. It's okay to be able to explain some things away, so to say. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, or that I don't believe it or you don't believe it. It just means we have to delve deeper. And the other kind of problem here is that most of us are citizen scientists. We have a really difficult time getting real scientists with, various degrees involved in this. It took us a long time to get engineers, and we have engineers now, which is great. And I understand why. The reason a lot of times, for at least here, I know in the States, the scientists, they're working on grants. This is funding from either the government, from private institutions. If they start getting out there on what is considered fringe, they're going to lose their funding for what they are, other things that they're working on. So they tread very lightly and carefully. Unfortunately, that's to the detriment of people like us who are, very involved in the field. We want to see more things done. The other problem is we have a difficult time, because the number one thing for science is being able to use the scientific method. The scientific method dictates that you have to be able to do the same experiment over and over, exactly the same way, repeatable results. That's very difficult to do with paranormal phenomena, as you know.
Yeah. And there's so many questions on that. But in terms of, sorry to be personal, to ask you this personal question, but Mary, there's a lot of things within you that I recognize within myself. And I had a very logical father who taught me how to be very down to earth, practical. But I am also what I would class myself a medium, but a natural medium. My grandmother was a medium, etc. So I've got this push pull from both sides. Because you're an intuitive medium as well, and do you find the science and then the esoteric world colliding sometimes? You have that push pull with what you're receiving from the spirit world, there must be this real desire. I know I do, to want to prove that this stuff is real.
Right. Absolutely. Especially in the beginning, conflict still is occasionally. I always say, the right side of the brain and the left side, are sometimes arguing with each other. Like, well, but that makes no sense. That can't be. We need to find, something more. And you know what? Now that I'm saying this is another draw into the sciences. It was allowing me to to appease that right side of my brain into, well, see, there are some things to back this up, science, logically. And another thing too, it made it a little difficult in the beginning while I would be doing reads, because I had a tendency to edit myself in real time, because I had to learn to shut that part of the brain down so that I could take in and just, in a very honest way, just receive and give that message, whatever it would be. But there is definitely a conflict, and that's actually going to the science helped me understand that these things are possible and how much we just don't understand. One of my number one things that I say with the paranormal is what that word means is without current scientific explanation. I really think that most of what we think is paranormal or high strangeness, we just don't understand it yet. It's really
Yeah.
quite normal. This is the way things work, but we just don't have an understanding of it yet.
And there's so many different hypotheses or ideas around dimensions and levels, and there's so much out there. Is there one particular formula, for the want of a better word, that you feel that we can go to some biblical scriptures and we talk about Lord's house has many rooms, etc., etc., referring to, I believe, these different dimensions? I mean, my mind just is blown by the concept of that. And one aspect of that I wanted to ask you, because I heard you doing an interview recently in America with a gentleman, and that you were talking about the shadow people. Now, there still is this level of ridicule within mediumship, within the spiritual community. I'm sorry, guys, but some people criticize others. Now, I've had experience with clients that have come to see me that have had experiences of shadow people where they've literally been physically pushed, they're scared, and when I've investigated, it doesn't feel, 9 times out of 10, when I go to a house and I investigate a haunting, it's normally a loved one with a beautiful message. But the shadow people
Mm-hmm.
are something different. And can I ask you, I know you've done a little bit of work on this, but can I ask you your opinion on the shadow people? And again, I don't want to create fear for people, because I generally don't think there's anything to worry.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when I get done, I'm almost interested. I am interested, not almost, I am interested, because sometimes there is differences culturally in our beliefs of or experiences. So I'm really curious about yours. For me personally, there's a few different things with shadow people. We're going to address a lot of times the negative thing right away. Could this
Yeah.
be something that's demonic? Yes. Anything is possible. Yes, it could be. It is such a rare, rare thing. It really, really is. I had the pleasure of talking with, oh goodness gracious, I'm going to forget, Lorraine Warren, Ed and Lorraine Warren. They were very known here, at least in the States, doing like exorcists and, things like that. So I had the pleasure of speaking with her. And when I was first getting involved, and I was worried about that because I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to be very open. And I really hadn't learned a lot of energy protections and so forth for myself yet as a psychic medium. But when I said to her, she could see my concern, she was like, and she was such a lovely lady. Oh my goodness, talk about bright energy. She had that. But she's like, this very sweet old lady voice. She's like, dear, it just doesn't happen all that much.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Just relax, And so, yes, it could be, but it's most likely not. The other thing is, and this is where it's going to get, I'm going to go off track here because could be a little mind blowing for some people. What this is when you start thinking about multiple dimensions, and you have to think of it not just in a matter of space, but time, is what if some of because my experiences personally in cases, they've been very benign. There's no other activity. There's no EVPs, electronic voice phenomena. There's no, things moving. There's just these shadows. They're just there in the shadow lurking. And so you kind of question, is this even now a human that doesn't have enough energy to manifest into a full-bodied apparition? That's another theory that, we go with. But the other one, which is the one that's a little more tricky, is what if this is either us or another copy universe that is there almost peering in on us. I often call shadow people the watchers. I think they're watchers. They tend to lurk in the shadows, and often there's just, like I said, nothing really going on. You have, when you start getting into dimensional theories and time, you have to kind of look at something and go, are we the ghost or are they the ghost? Or are both of the answer to that, both? And that gets kind of tricky then, because there was oh gosh, this is probably at least 20 years ago. There was an episode on one of these ghost shows. What fascinated me about it is they were doing like an EVP session. It was a hotel here in the States that a princess, and I can't remember who the princess was, stayed here. This was like her wing in her room. So they're sitting there and they're
really?
just, yeah. And they're like, princess, are you here? And what was interesting is upon playing the recording back, they didn't audibly hear this. When he said, princess, are you here? She said, and you could hear this unusual accent. And it was sort of like, well, of course I am. Where are you?
Wow.
That line alone, right, makes you go, what? And then she proceeded and there was some more conversation. So you have to think, was she sitting there in 1933 in her bed, in her bedroom, and she hears a voice? And is this on the other side of the, she's thinking, am I losing it? Is this on the other side of the door? Of course I'm here. Where are you? So you start to get these types of audio exchanges that have to trigger the thoughts of, are we often bumping into each other, crossing the realms of time? The thing, if you don't mind, if I just take a moment here about this issue of time. We as humans tend to think of time as being very linear. Year one, year two, each in front of the other. But what if time, and there is some science to support this, all occurs at once? And what I mean is that if you were to imagine some sort of track race, and the gates, and they all open at the same time. Each lane, let's say it's a horse race, each lane is a dimension and a year in time. And just like a horse racing or a horse race, those horses don't always stay in their lanes, do they? They sometimes bump into each other.
That's true.
So our experiences with time is not as straightforward, literally, as we think it is. It's more fluid, and it's all existing at once, but in separate dimensions. And when you start to put that together, you get to the who's the ghost.
Yeah. So,
going back to the watchers in the shadow. Yes. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Sorry, Mary. There is something that just come in. I'm not sure if I'm being inspired to ask this question, but then does this then connect to the different type of apparitions? So it was a voice, it was a sound frequency, potentially, like you say, from a different parallel or different time zone. Now, what about, so for example, my sister, she bought a house a few years ago. She moved into the house. It backed onto a field, and at the bottom of the garden, she was putting out her rubbish, and there stood a Roman soldier in all his glory, all his armor, everything. He stood there.
Wow.
She said, "I was like, I did say, you did make sure it wasn't a reenactment. We do a lot of reenactment battles over here." But it was a Tuesday evening at tea time, and there was nobody around. And this gentleman stood there with a spear. He had a shield and sword and the full armor. He even had the orange tunic, which apparently is to do with the auxiliary regiment, which means they were recruited locally rather than from Rome. Now, she told her partner, and her partner made a comment, well, before they built on the site, they excavated it because there was a known Roman villa on the site. That's amazing.
Okay.
And they found a lot of graves and they moved the bodies. But in terms of that, then, how, I mean, and I said to my sister, I was kind of, if I'm going to see a full body apparition, I want to have a conversation, right? Do you think that's possible to have that conversation with that entity or that, God, I don't even know whether to call it a person, an image, a vision?
There's certainly been people who have claims to that, and people that really just have no reason to be making, I mean, you feel that it's legitimate. They're generally good, honest people. Here in the States, there was the Velisca house. There was a murder there. This is happening, I believe it was there. It was on a farm, and it was a lot of farmland around it. The reason that that becomes important is that there was a group that had paid to investigate there overnight. And the person who, the caretaker, met them inside. So they were unloading a lot of their equipment and coming in. And the one guy says, "Hey, I just, you know, uh, I don't even know exactly what was all said, blah, blah, blah. But your caretaker outside, caretaker, I'm the only person here." The person told him.
Yeah.
"No, I just spoke to somebody outside." So he claims to have had a conversation, which is fascinating. How do you stand that close to an entity that is not supposed to be real and have words exchanged, and he did not know that person was, to us, a ghost? That is fascinating to me. So people have done that. The other thing that's interesting, because you're saying with this Roman, this is something that would never happen here in the States because of the age of our country and the people who came through here. If you notice, there are differences in our experiences, but they really do happen according to our history and culture. So I find it, I have not ever investigated anywhere in the UK.
Oh, wow.
Someday I'll get
You would
there.
love
I would
it.
love to do that.
You would, yeah. And that brings me on. I've got Mary, I'm so sorry. I wish I could talk to you all day, but we only have a finite time. I mean, I remember recently investigating a hall for a friend. We were hoping to go live. We're still hoping to do one in the future. But the hall was like 13th century, and there was a gentleman in my bedroom the day before we even started to go there, warning me not to come. So I have some interesting stuff. I know you also spoke about that live with people about protection, about connecting with energies that are not great. For you, do you have like a protocol that you go through to protect yourself? Or, I mean, I don't like to use the word protection because, like your friend, that lady said, that it's very rare, but it happens.
I think,
So
maybe you know what? I think you're right. The word protection, and maybe I'm going to start changing how I say that, because maybe it's a fortification of our energy. It's just to build it, to keep it strong, for multiple reasons. I do give into some of I will carry some crystals and things with that, which, by the way, science does kind of back up the crystal thing. We get into that another time. Because again, my brain was like, well, wait a minute. Is this just, it's a rock, it's a stone. And then I did some research.
sorry.
But you have that. And then as well is there's a lot of visualization and calming of your space, your energy, as you just go forth. There are some tools that I do use. I highly recommend this to people, this one in particular. And believe it or not, this actually came from an audience member at a lecture many, many years ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. She had it said, take mirrors, like floor length mirrors, so that they cover from head to toe, and place them
Right.
around your whole body facing out, having to do with the idea of the makeup of mirrors and minerals and whatnot in that. But the good energy can come through, but negative energy, because it's at such a low frequency, will bounce off that mirror and go right back to the person, the entity, whatever it is, wherever it's coming from. So there's a very mild protection. So you can get the feel for being able to do reads, but in a safe way, to really black out anything that could be attach itself to you, or try to, or so forth. The other one is,
Oh,
and
that's
this, I don't know why I call it. Go ahead.
yeah. Sorry, man. I was going to say that's really interesting about the mirrors. You guys, you must know Professor Raymond Moody and his study of near-death experiences back in the early 70s, and he kind of brought that into mainstream and really brought that to the world. Excuse me, but he discovered an ancient Greek form of scrying, what was called psychomantium. And he created a booth of mirrors where spirit were able to move through those mirrors. So
Right.
I find that really interesting that you also using that for protection as well. That's really quite interesting.
Right. Because just like what you were saying with this gentleman, is that the entity, the energies from the spirits can come through, but because negative, bad is just
Yeah,
resonates at such a low frequency, that gets blocked and it gets bounced back,
yeah,
and kind of keeps
yeah.
you in a safer state,
That's
more
interesting.
energized state
That is,
as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But
The other
I mean,
thing that I will use is like a shield.
yeah. Well,
The
a mental shield.
no, it's a visualization again. I
Yeah,
don't know why I call it this. I think it's because of the old Star Trek series, and they had the way that um, the way their energy came when they would appear and then disappear. So we all have, first of all of us and our energy as humans beings, we have so much. All of us, we are capable of so much more than we think we are, or that we
yeah,
know that we
yeah,
are. With that being said, we all have had those experiences where you meet someone, you know nothing about them, and you just immediately are like, oh, I don't like you. Like, you just get that bad feeling. Well, the same thing can happen when you're sitting in, a theater or something, and someone sits down next to you, and you just immediately are like, you get that you're uncomfortable. It's just uncomfortable and not good. I will put up my Star Trek shield. It's like this little that just comes down, and it's like this black, lead cement type of thing, and just totally block them out.
yeah,
Because I don't
yeah.
have any interest in absorbing anything from them. And that is a little thing that does happen as psychic mediums as well. You're just very open. So that's why we do have to be a little bit more careful.
It's like, I mean, I use a visualization when I've connected to someone for healing. I use and wash my hands like I was scrubbing up for an operation. And it's just telling, in my understanding, it's telling my subconscious what it is I'm trying to do. So energetically, that kind of responds to that. So visualization, I think, is a really important role within that. It's interesting.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely agree. I think it's huge, and maybe sometimes it's not given enough attention as it should. The reason, because there really is something to the idea of what you put your attention to is that manifestation of it, so to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of the generations, they have like their vision boards. This is how they're. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, because if you're putting your attention, here's a different example, just very quick. If you're doing a house cleansing, people a lot of time tend to, cast off the darkness and the evil and the bad and the attachments as they're saging and going through their home, where you really should be focusing to the positive. So by flooding and bringing in that light, that is pushing out the negative and the bad.
Yeah.
If you put your attention to the negative and the bad, you're feeding it. So that goes to the whole idea of the visualization. I love the idea that you do like the washing of the hands, because you really are purifying, clearing the energy.
And I was always taught the same. And a lot of people, when they open to work, they open up their chakras. And I always visualize my chakras like beautiful flowers, like a lotus leaf, a flower, like opening and connecting to that sunlight in the morning. And then people use that word close. And I think that's energetically, you're closing yourself off, but you could be potentially damaging yourself on a subtle level that you need to come back to everyday normal connectedness, if you like, with yourself, rather than being completely open. Just bring yourself back to a normal functioning state. That's something else. So intention is really important.
Intention. Absolutely. And again, the visualization of things, we're as human beings, we just the way we're made, we're all about, the tangible, right? What we can see and feel and hear. So by seeing it visually in our minds, we are also, again, helping to create that. For me, one of the things I will do before a read is I will, I imagine, I'm visualizing the light. I will physically take my hands, put it up in front of me, and I do this like deep breath and blow. And just blow. And to me, I'm seeing that energy blow out into the ether, so to say. And that's to help me connect to the other side. Again, it's, as humans, I think we need to do that to be able to manipulate, if that's the right word, the energies that we are and that we're dealing with.
I should also remind people, if you don't mind, Mary, you are coming on to our SBTV Spiritual Talk live on the 27th of June. And we're so excited to get you on here, guys. So if you're listening to our conversation, this will be your opportunity to ask Mary a question. And Mary has so much experience in so many different fields. And one thing I wanted to touch on, Mary, you've also, am I right in saying you've done a little bit of work around Bigfoot, Sasquatch? I love that.
I have. Real quick on this, I came in, and of all and I'm going to say it this way, of all the crazy things, right, that we see, we do, we've experienced, that was the last frontier for me. And I had a friend who was a Bigfoot enthusiast, hunter, whatever you want to say. And so I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to go see, I'm going to go see what my crazy friends up at doing out in the woods at night. And I won't get into it now, but had such phenomenal experiences, not with Bigfoot, with other types of phenomena, that I was hooked.
Really?
And I kept coming back. Yeah, I kept coming back for all the other things. And in the process, realized my own prejudice, because there is a huge amount of people who have claimed experiences. Statistic, logic, numbers, the most logical thing we have, statistics, dictates they all can't be crazy and they all can't be misidentifications. They are experiencing something. So we needed I needed to delve into that. And that's what kind of started it with that.
A friend of mine is very interested in Sasquatch. Hi, MJ, if you're watching this on our recording. He's asked, has the Bigfoot ever been sighted more to the, I think, East Coast? He's down in Florida that way, in the Appalachian Mountains and around there, or the Blue Ridge Mountains, rather than, I think he said they're more up north, the sightings.
There's pockets. This has been in my experiences so far. And there's also, like you said, various names. I bet down where he is, it's more referred to as a skunk ape than a Bigfoot. They'll call it a skunk ape.
Okay.
Yeah, like in the Appalachian Mountains, different states, a little bit north of him. But then you can go out to the Pacific Northwest in the states here, and they're having a ton of experiences in Washington and Oregon, and there's a lot of open land there. Interestingly enough, where people weren't looking is where I was doing a lot of the research for over 5 years. I was going out there on these night hikes. That this is in the Midwest. This is Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin. And it's a place called the Kettle Moraine. And it was it was formed from glaciers. So there's a lot of activity there as well. So there's pockets all over the place. You just kind of need to tune into them. And there's probably ones that we aren't aware of yet. I mean, to me, Bigfoot is a hard topic only because there's really a lot of split on what is a Bigfoot. Because I once had an interviewer ask me, do you believe, because I was always the kind of like, just holding back as long as possible, on answering this. Do you believe in Bigfoot? And I landed up and stopped and said, I think the more important question is, what is a Bigfoot? Is this a 900-year-old hominid or a species that we haven't discovered? Or is this something that's interdimensional? Personally, I feel it's interdimensional. It's like all the rest of our phenomena of now you see it, now you don't.
So I had an experience, and it was late at night, and we don't have massive forests here. We have small wooded areas and forests, and we do have still have a lot nice countryside in the UK. But where we live here, I was north of Norwich, going out towards the country, and I was coming home. Now, just to point out to viewers, I hadn't been drinking, I was driving, okay, and I suddenly became aware of what I can only describe in my headlights. I saw an object that was about between 30, 40 foot tall. And those in the UK remember the Ready Breck advert, that's going back a little bit, walked from one side of the road to another, which I know was the golf course. So the golf course at midnight, it was quite late at night. There's going to be nobody there. And this thing just saw this outline move. Now, apparently there is a legend in, I think, Taverham, Drayton Way, there was a giant, but I don't know. Again, to me, with what I saw, it looked potentially, it could be an interdimensional being. But is it more to do with our eyes, that our eyes only see a small percentage of light, or what we can see? So it could just be down to our own evolution. So I'm not sure, but to me, the feeling I got was it was definitely interdimensional.
Yeah, that's interesting that you brought that up about the spectrum of our vision, because I think that is a spot on observation of how we're seeing things and what we think that we're often seeing, and how much we're missing, to be quite honest. Think about, like, since we've really delved into UV, into the ocean, how many more, hundreds and hundreds of species of things that we didn't know existed because we couldn't see them. But when you're getting into the dimensional, right, it is really tricky and tough to determine. But certainly all this high strangeness that people are experiencing, again, I'm not going to, my first approach with people is, I believe that you believe. and now tell me more,
Yeah.
type of a thing. And the
Absolutely.
idea behind that, right, is that there are very bizarre things going on and people are experiencing it, whether it's a shadow person or a Bigfoot. There's another creature here called Beast of Bray Road. It's in Wisconsin as well. A woman named Linda Godfrey actually she's passed on now. She coined that phrase, or she did that phrase. And that was a dog-like, wolf-like, man-like creature people were seeing on this road called Bray Road in Wisconsin, hence the name.
Yeah.
So these types of things happen. Again, though, I really have to go back to the idea of the now you see it, now you don't.
Yeah.
I was talking talking to a couple that were Bigfoot hunters at a conference. We were both speaking and we were just having dinner though. And the gentleman goes on and he starts talking about, and I'm out in the woods and then I see this red pair of eyes and then this just jolt of energy, like it rushed me, came through me. That description, if you were to take those exact words and put it into a known haunted house, another person who would say that was a demon. Another person would say it was, some type of ghost phenomena. It just, it's our interpretations often of what we're seeing and experiencing. We have to be careful to make sure we're open to all possibilities. Like you should not go out there looking for ghosts, just ghosts. You should not go looking for just Bigfoot. You go out and you see, we used to have a children's show. I don't know if you had it in the UK, Sesame Street. And they had
we did.
one of the
yeah.
Right. And what did we learn as preschoolers? One of these things is not like the other. And that's the mentality. You go out there and you look, what doesn't belong? What's unusual? What's odd? Let's delve into that. Maybe you're going to find an explanation. Maybe you're not. But, that's how we kind of have to look at it and bring it in. If I hadn't done that when I was out there for those 5 years in the Kettle Moraine, I would have missed so much. I would have missed, if I was out there going, oh, I'm looking for Bigfoot, I would have missed the Native American ghost experiences out there. I would have missed the phenomenal light show. And what I mean is it was the UAPs that were, I've never met anybody who's ever experienced this. This went on for 30 minutes.
Sorry, Mary. Do you mean UFOs? Is that the same thing? UAPs?
No, it's like a aerial phenomena or light phenomena. We'll say it that way.
Okay.
Like a light anomalies. And so that was one of the first things. That's one of the reasons I told you earlier. I kind of got hooked. We went out and we're walking and all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but we start seeing these lights pulsing and flashing anywhere from 2 feet to 10 feet in diameter. Irregularly shaped, diffused white light that went from like maybe, just above the ground to the tops of the trees. This covered 100-foot area. And when we were watching it, it would just be like this flash, pulse up here, there. I joked at one point, I had no equipment with me to test like EMF or anything else. And I thought, I wonder if I could even feel like maybe a static field. And so as I started walking to where this line of lights was, I had my hand out. I joked, because like the movie Back to the Future, and looked back at my friend and said, if I disappear, I'm in 1955. And so we just I didn't feel anything, but we went on. We eventually walked away from it because I've never, I mean, I don't know anybody who's other than us two that have ever experienced that much, that long. As we walked away, I probably got about, again, I'm, I'm American. I apologize. I have to say feet and inches, but about 50 feet, along. And then I had a phantom experience on this trail. It was what they call a blood moon, very, very bright light. We were on a trail path. You could read a book. The moon was so bright. So, and then this becomes important because as I'm walking, I heard something very large. You can hear that coming up behind you. And I just stopped and pivoted around to look, and nothing was there. And I had very clear vision on that night, to see. Those two things were my, like, literally 20 minutes in, not even 20 minutes into that investigation. And that's why I kept going back out into the woods, and then more got into the Bigfoot thing as we went along, and really trying to, by the way, with that evidence, what is evidence? I do have a background in a couple different things, one of them being the legal field. And so I looked at it, what would stand up in a court, in a case? Would this be submissible, and would it stand up? And so you start approaching it and start formatting a plan of how we're going to put all this information together, to build a picture to help us make sense of all these strange things that are happening.
Yeah. So can I just touch on that slightly? Do you think that was an elemental? So in the UK, we kind of use this term, the elemental realm, fairies, gnomes, all sorts, sprites, you name it. We are very open to that in the UK. Do you think there was this was a natural phenomenon that was connecting to a slightly different dimension that we couldn't physically see properly, but there was a lot of lights?
I actually started to check into this a little bit. One is, when things like this happen, is I want to know two things: what's under the ground and what's above me. So, because you do have things like earthquake lights and St. Elmo's fire, there's all various names, ball lightning. I've actually I was a young person in my 20s, long before I actually had gotten into the paranormal field, experienced what would probably be called ball lightning. I have zero explanation for it. My daughter and I were in the kitchen. She was at the kitchen table, and the windows were behind my daughter. And this becomes relevant because literally this huge and bright, and there was a little bit of almost like a thunder. There was a rumble noise that that filled up the archway between my daughter and I. We lost sight of each other. We could not see each other. So I know it wasn't on the outside. It was in the house. What? Like, when you're like, what is happening? Wow. What is that? And I checked, things that I knew it couldn't even have been back then. I'm like, I don't know, maybe the light bulb in the stove exploded. Maybe it was a transformer out on the corner. Maybe, you're trying to rationalize something that I really couldn't at that time. So there are a lot of phenomena that are natural, could be natural in cause, or are natural. And then there are things that are not. It's really difficult sometimes to discern the difference between the two. And the vision thing of this is really important. As I developed my psychic side, medium side more, and I was going out there, I had an unusual experience of seeing, and here's where it's going to get weird, because I'm going to be really honest. My gut is telling me I was seeing something frequency-wise that was interdimensional. My head, it's up for debate. Who knows? But what was occurring was I was seeing what they would refer to as like ultraviolet black light, ultraviolet, that purple blue. What was interesting is I could see branches behind it. I could see all the objects behind it. So you could see through it, but it was this cloud, and it would just come and then would disappear, and it would come and disappear. We were getting some unusual reads as far as EMF. My friend did not ever catch and see it. And he actually looked, he says, you think this because you're with your psychic, your psychic stuff, as he would say. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
sure.
At one point, I mean, honestly, I even went like, am I having a stroke? I mean, I'm like, am I okay physically? Why am I experiencing
Yeah.
this? So you look at all these things. The reason I say that is because of the types of experiences that have been documented out there. GPS coordinates is bouncing 60 miles away, to equipment failures of audio and visual and so on and so forth. So I start looking at this like an interdimensional, whether it's a Bigfoot or other types of beings like ghosts, which are interdimensional as well, that maybe sometimes our perceptions of what we think we're seeing are a little skewed according to our personal makeup, to or our belief system.
Yeah. It's amazing.
You have
so
it. You
much
mentioned fairies.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me here in the States. It's such a rarity. Elementals.
So I'm very, very lucky. I've grown up around people that were very intuitive, very connected, and the adults would talk about, for example, when I first started work when I was about 16, I used to walk across this field, and normally the rabbits, the wildlife would run. Obviously, I'm a human being, but after a while, they got used to me. But they were saying that you let nature get used to your energy, your presence, and that you get to see more. So people were really open-minded. I mean, I've had some phenomenon in this cabin on this screen with white lights. I remember both the lady I was talking to, this white light came into the room and it just went into my forehead. It was very unusual. So I do get lots of phenomenon here, but I attribute that to I've got a ley line here. So again,
Okay.
is that something that either increases the power of phenomena? Is there underground water here? Because we're about a mile away from a local river. So like you said, you do have to look at the logical, but sometimes there's things that defy logic. And that's where being mediumistic. Yeah.
And sometimes those logic is really supports it, because if you're, like you just said, if you're on an area that has some type of water for conductivity, for increasing, the strength of whatever frequencies that are there, that really kind of supports the idea of why this phenomena may be occurring more in one place over another, or to one person over another on it.
Yeah.
I do have to tell you this, because this is not, like I said, a popular, so to say, thing here in the States. I think, honestly, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I experienced, but I think I might have seen a fairy. And so here in the States, you hear me kind of chuckle, because that's such a bizarre thing. But you were talking about that light. We were out, because it was the best time really for investigating, in the woods at the Kettle Moraine. It's nighttime. It is about what would be, and I don't know how to translate that, but like 8 degrees. I mean, it is freezing, frozen tundra out there, kind of thing, cold. And that becomes important, because as I was sitting there, I saw this very small white, and I describe it as when you look at sun hitting a water and you get those little glistening diamonds. off
Yes.
that reflection off the water. That was what it was. It appeared like to me, but just one. And the way it was moving. And the bottom line is where I'm going with it. It wasn't an insect. What else could it have been? I don't know. So I here I've described it. I'm like, I don't know. It was like a little Tinkerbell. And I'm like, that probably doesn't help my case in having people believe me saying it looked like a Tinkerbell.
And that is the biggest problem. But logic must and does have a place, because there is a worry that fear can take over. And I know you joked on a recent interview in America that the only thing you fear are zombies, which I thought was very funny. But in reality, there isn't a lot to be fearful of, is there? There is a lot of discovery.
Yeah.
And for me, my personal journey is to try to be open-minded and try to not, and as I said in the opening of this interview, your study into quantum physics, multiple dimensions, etc., but also consciousness and the way we think ourselves into our reality and way we perceive. It's so important. It's so important that we, and again, you said in this interview, how important it is for us to grow as people in terms of understanding our power and changing from within to change without. Mary, we've been going for over an hour. This has just been a taster of interview. We're coming back on the 27th. But my last question to you is, what would you like to change? What would you give to people that would help them if they're having doubts or their own experiences? Indeed, how would you, I mean, you're unique in the fact that you're a medium, and I kind of want to say scientist to a degree as well. So you've kind of got that duality. So you're looking at the logic. You're not taking everything verbatim as what it is. And I love
Right.
that within someone in the esoteric world. I love it.
I think that it is about, if nothing else that I've learned, especially teaching this stuff, is people are about the experiential. They need to experience. I could say, here is a stack of papers, scientific papers that prove that ghosts exist. Would this make you believe? And most people will still respond, well, I don't know. I think I'd have to see it for myself. And so I would say people need to put themselves in a place, in a position to be able to experience it themselves, because that is probably going to be the catalyst that is going to then send them into, okay, what just happened? What is going on? And start to doing their own research and looking into these things. Because people can talk at, and I'm using that word at us all day long. But when we experience it, we take that in. We really, truly take it into our core.
Yeah. Mary Marshal, thank you so much for giving up your time to be with us today. We can't wait to see you on the 27th. Guys, it's your chance to interact with Mary and ask her your questions and maybe share some of your experiences too. But for now, Mary Marshal, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. Pleasure meeting you, Paul.
Thanks. And we'll be back. See you soon, guys. We'll be back very soon with another great interview. Take care for now, everybody.